apparently he had this MMA dude on his podcast.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy. Yeah, he's a
Kennedy.
former UFC fighter, but he's also a Green Beret. So he's like
okay. Interesting.
yeah, he's a real fucking crazy guy. He had this show on I think it was called like Hard to Kill or Tough to Kill or something.
That sounds like something that Joe Rogan would be into watching.
Yeah.
But while this guy was on Joe's show the other day, he brought up an interesting idea, which is something that, someone like me would fantasize about seeing, but never actually dream to be brought to fruition. And that would be an actual, multi-hour long format debate on a podcast, namely the Joe Rogan Experience, between the two presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Now, I don't really think this is actually going to happen because Joe Biden's people aren't going to let him do it.
They're not stupid. Yeah. They're
But
not that stupid.
if there's even like a 5% chance that could happen, I think it would be amazing. I hate the way they do debates, on television with all the ads and with the stupid moderators asking questions from a, pro corporate framework. And that's ultimately, again, why this isn't going to happen, is because Joe Rogan would say, like, why don't you give everyone universal basic income? Like, why not do these things? And then they'd have to do this ridiculous tap dance that they want to avoid having to do, which is why the pre-selected corporate media moderators refuse to ask them serious questions. But I think it would be, about as serious of it sounds weird to say it would be a serious exercise because obviously Joe Rogan's reputation is he likes to talk about aliens and weed and MMA. But I do think that there is some truth to the fact that Joe Rogan does kind of represent like the everyman perspective.
The average Joe.
Yeah, like literally the average Joe. And I don't mean that in an insulting way or anything like that. But, he clearly, like when he asks questions about politics, you can tell that he's not asking them from a politically motivated standpoint. He's asking them because he genuinely wants to know the answer.
The same way he would ask any other question. Yeah,
exactly.
Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan wouldn't be obviously he wouldn't be my first choice in like my dream moderation. But I do think he's really good because for a couple of reasons why he would make a good person to do it. Because while there are a lot of people who try and portray Joe Rogan as like this alt-right like guy, I don't really consider him to be a part of the whole intellectual dark web, even though he does buddy up with, Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and a lot of the people who I find extremely like repulsive and annoying. And at times I find Joe Rogan kind of annoying and a little bit repulsive.
Yeah, same.
But I do think that because one, he has a massive following and he's developed a long time listener base. I mean, he's probably the most important broadcaster of our generation, I think, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that people trust him I think people trust him way too much and they value his opinion way too much on things that they shouldn't. And in the past, I would say, like, and I may have said it on this podcast that like the show does irritate me more when he gets into politics. But I do think that in the context of a presidential debate, the things that irritate me about his show when he gets into politics are actually the things that would serve it really well for a presidential debate for exactly the same reason that you brought up. Because he does ask questions really earnestly. He doesn't, I feel, have a real partisan divide. Like he was just as happy to have Bernie Sanders on as Tulsi Gabbard, as Andrew Yang. And those people, while they're all outsiders, definitely represent different, unique worldviews. And, obviously he's had guys like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder and other fucks that I obviously can't stand. But, he's had a wide-ranging guest, and that's like his whole bit. So I think people from every political spectrum can at least say, okay, Joe Rogan's given somebody that I respect a fair crack before, right? Like I don't think you can deny that he gave Bernie Sanders a fair crack when he went on his show. And I also think it's fucking hilarious that when like Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg tried to get on, he told them to go fuck themselves, just like Elizabeth Warren. He's like, I don't want to talk to you for 2 hours. Get the hell out of here. Like, and I think that, that's kind of an aside, but I think that what makes it good is the fact that he's going to ask questions that I think like you said, the everyday person is going to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And he's going to push back in the way that the everyday person would push back and not in the way that you and I would push back, which would be frustrating for me because there wouldn't be like, on this date, you did this. You just said you did this. It would be more like, well, why haven't we done that?
Right. And he would also put things in terms which would actually force the candidates to kind of talk to the American people as if they're actual human beings that are having a discussion about things that affect their days on a daily life, not in this weird policy speak, which candidates kind of get away with framing everything through to, reduce the shittiness of how it sounds. If you can just put everything into a 30-second pre-rehearsed speech that, is filled with platitudes and cliches, then you can kind of obfuscate around how you're actually fucking over the American people with your policy. But if you're talking to, someone who isn't framing the question in that way and actually wants a serious answer from you and is expecting a long form response and not just a quick, snappy, pre-rehearsed thing, then at that point you start to actually have a real conversation, which is crazy to think, but that doesn't happen at debates. It really is.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anywhere in American politics, and that's what's crazy about it. A 4-hour conversation is the longest. Like, I mean, I want to say that the longest time Tulsi Gabbard was on the podcast, unless like maybe
2
it was
hours,
2 hours top. So
maybe.
You got to think like Bernie Sanders was probably on there for 1 hour, right? Like maybe an hour.
He was on there for almost exactly an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to think that's 4 times that amount. And so you're going to have to really talk. One, that's going to be absolutely impossible for either of these candidates to do because Donald Trump cannot spin his wheels for 4 hours. And I don't think Joe Biden can do anything cognitively for 4 hours.
So much Adderall between them.
Like, it would be insane. So I think that I think that it's a complete impossibility for this to happen, although I think it would be tremendous for the country because, like you said, Joe Rogan would look at Joe Biden and he would say, how come you want to bring the Medicare age to 60? How'd you come up with that number? And Joe would be like, he'd be like, why not 45? Why not 50? 50 is pretty old. How come 50? Can we meet in the middle? What's going on? And then Joe Biden would have to be like, oh, well, Bob, come on, man. Yeah. And then after like an hour and a half of that, like it would get really fucking old. So I think it would embarrass the shit out of both candidates. Which
it would. And that's why it's not going to happen, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, maybe they could, if it were to happen at all, there's no way they do it for 4 hours. Maybe they would
underlines
get it down
the
to 2 hours.
hollowness of the American governance because they can't talk about their own fucking ideas because they're not their ideas.
They're not their ideas, and also even their quote unquote ideas. They don't want to talk about them too much because then people are actually going to expect them to do it. There's a reason why Joe Biden only very rarely brought up the Biden initiative, which was to do a public option, which they've now completely stopped talking about. AKA, it's not going to fucking happen. It was all a lie to get people on board with their stupid healthcare plan and turn people against Medicare for all, which is the obvious answer. So yeah, that's the problem with it, and that's another infuriating things about politics and about debating in general. It's just politicians say whatever the fuck they want. Biden did it 100 times in his debate with Bernie, just outwardly denying the reality. So, I mean, yeah, it's all going to be a farce, but at least if it was hosted by someone who wasn't a corporate TV suit, then at least it would feel like an actual conversation instead of just politics.
It would illustrate how hollow it is. Like it would lay it all bare for the people to see, which I think would be important, but obviously it would never happen.
Yeah, no, we can only hope.
Yeah.